This talk is about a well-known problem where there are quite a few challenges, and one of the main ideas here is to show that an original idea that appeared already in Karttunen's first paper on the problem of presupposition projection can give us an extra mileage on this problem than more than previously assumed. Now, if we start to illustrate the problem in its very simple form, then triggering of a presupposition can be by some definite like SuB's partner, which presupposes, of course, that SuB has a partner. And we have simple cases of projection. For instance, if you put this trigger in the consequent of a conditional, like if SuB is in a good mood, she will bring her partner to the party. You have full projection of this presupposition. The whole sentence presupposes that SuB has a partner. On the other hand, if the antecedent of the same conditional somehow nullifies this presupposition just by asserting it, in the case of if SuB is married, she will bring her partner to the party, then people do not experience any presupposition in such cases. Similar effects were illustrated by Karttunen for conjunction and disjunction, and I will not repeat them here. There are some major theoretical approaches to deal with this problem. One is the trivalent truth tables by Kleene as modified by Peters, where basically the whole idea is denotational. It's based on truth values, the three truth values, and the whole approach is sensitive to the well-known provisor problem. Another famous approach is the one by Stalnaker and Heim. It's satisfaction-based, it's denotational as well, and it's sensitive to the same provisor problem. Incidentally, it can be proven that at least under some versions, the two approaches are completely equivalent, at least empirically. Now, Karttunen's approach in his 73 paper is entailment-based, meaning that it's inferential, not only based on truth values or sets of possible words in given models. It's inferential, therefore. It doesn't face the provisor problem. However, it is underdeveloped, and some have claimed that it is stipulative, that the filtering conditions in Karttunen's paper are fully stipulative. The current claim is that Karttunen's approach is much better starter on the projection problem than commonly believed. Now, Karttunen logic, what I'm going to propose here, is a calculus that addresses the projection problem for a propositional language with presuppositions, and the principles are that the presupposition may be satisfied in its local context, as in the Heim-Stalnaker approach. However, the filtering is inference-based, not denotational, as in Karttunen's paper, and there is an update of local context, which is based on the Kleene-Peters approach. Global contexts are independent of the projection problem under this conception. The advantages is that we get filtering without proviso, as in Karttunen's original paper. However, in a fully recursive propositional language that dissociates presuppositions from conditions on satisfaction, this is going to be a major issue that I'm going to discuss later on in this talk. Cumulative context, that the local context can accumulate information from different clauses, is a property of the recursiveness of this system. And at the end, what we get is a general notion of a projection calculus where different approaches can be compared. I will not be talking about this to a big extent in this talk. Now, before we describe the Karttunen logic that is proposed here, it's very useful to start with a classical trivalent solution, because it's the basis, I think, also of Karttunen's proposal and the development in this talk. Now, in the strong Kleene truth tables, basically we take the bivalent properties into account in the following way. Suppose that you are looking at conjunction. In conjunction, in the bivalent case, we know that falsity determines falsity. So if we have one of the operands false, in a conjunction, the result is, of course, false. This property is retained in the strong Kleene table, which means that when we have one of the conjuncts false, then the other conjunct doesn't matter for the result, which is uniformly false, even if the other operand fails. In Peter's version of the strong Kleene tables, we do that, but asymmetrically, from left to right, which means that if we have a failure on the left, then we have a sure failure. This is the distinction. This point is the distinction from the strong Kleene table. But if we have falsity on the left, if alpha is false, then the result is false, even if we have a failure on the right in beta, just like in the classical strong Kleene table. Now, this asymmetry is useful and was described nicely in a recent paper by Matt Mandelkund and associates, also using experimental data that they collected. Now, the same principle is used also for disjunction and implication and any other binary operator based on bivalent definitions, where we know that for implication, falsity or zero is determinant from the left, which means that also in an implication, falsity determines the result when it appears on the left. This time it determines it to be true. That's the reason that in the Kleene-Peters tables we have here truth, even if we have a failure. And for disjunction, it's truth. That's the reason that we have here 1, even when we have a failure, when the left conjunct alpha is 1 or true. Now, let's see how this is used in order to account for filtering and projection. In a case of filtering, like if Sue is married, she will bring her partner to the party, we need to consider the 2 cases. If Sue is married, then of course she has a partner and the presupposition is satisfied. If she is unmarried, then according to the Kleene treatments, the conditional is trivially true. Therefore, failure is impossible, even if we have a failure. She's unmarried and doesn't have any partner. The conditional will still be true. As a result, we see that there is no presupposition. There can be no failure, which means that the presupposition is tautological. This reasoning was exploited more recently in the papers by Philip Schlenker and others later on, which noted the incremental nature of the Kleene-Peters table. Now, if we look at a different example where we might expect projection, we see something slightly different than what we might expect. If Sue is in a good mood, she will bring her partner to the party. What we experience is full projection. However, what we have here is slightly different. If she is in a good mood, if Sue is in a good mood, it still may happen that she has no partner, in which case a failure is possible. If Sue is not in a good mood, it's guaranteed, according to the Kleene reasoning, that failure is impossible. The conditional will be trivially false. The conditional will be trivially true. The net result of these observations is that the predicted presupposition is that if Sue is in a good mood, she has a partner. This is a bit weaker than what we experience in the sentence, which is just that Sue has a partner. And this is an example for what is called the provisor problem. What we have as an attested presupposition is that Sue has a partner, but what is predicted is somewhat weaker. If she's in a good mood, she has a partner. Similar issues show up with respect to conjunction and disjunction, as we see here. And the question is, to what extent this is really a problem? Should we really worry about it? Now, my answer to this is that we need to worry about it, but we need to be clear about what the worry precisely is. Now, there are 2 notions about relations between sentences and bivalent propositions in relation to presuppositions. One is the classical notion of presupposition, and if we have S and alpha bivalent proposition, then alpha is a presupposition of S if it is entailed by both S and its negation. And similarly for other wholes, this is the approach by Van Vassen, following basically Strawson and many others. Now, there is a different approach, which is characteristic of the Heim-Stalnaker direction, and this is that alpha is sometimes considered a presupposition, more accurately a condition on satisfaction, if alpha entails that S is either true or false, namely that that presuppositions of S do not fail. And hearers are required to recognize alpha as common ground in order to interpret the sentence S. Now, the claim that I'm making here is that the provisor problem is in the modeling of presuppositions, not of conditions on satisfaction, and actually we need both of them in a system, in one way or another. What's precisely the empirical difference between these two notions? Let's be clear about it. Suppose that our sentence is, if Sue visits Dan, his beard will annoy her. Normally, you would conclude from that Dan has a beard. And this indeed is classified as, this alpha is indeed classified as a presupposition using tests like putting negation or putting a possibility operator in front of it. These are classical hold. And indeed, the presupposition is projected as an entailment. Now, this classifies Dan has a beard as a presupposition of sentence S. However, the sentence only requires a weaker statement for its satisfaction. Consider beta now. If Sue visits Dan, he'll have a beard by the time she arrives. If you say something like, if Sue visits Dan, he'll grow a beard before she arrives, to annoy her, to make her happy, whatever his intentions are, it is perfectly okay to say then, if Sue visits Dan, his beard will annoy her, because we know by this background that that Dan will have had a beard by the time that Sue comes to visit him. This means that alpha, the presupposition of S, is not a necessary for S's satisfaction. However, beta is. If you explicitly negate beta, you say something like, Sue may visit Dan without him having a beard, then it's very strange to utter the sentence S. And the conclusion is that beta is the condition on the satisfaction on S, while alpha is its presupposition as standardly assumed. Now, Karttunen's solution has already some parts that can explain this difference between presupposition and conditions on satisfaction. To see that, let's first talk about the solution he proposed. In a sentence like, if Sue is married, she will bring her partner to the party, Karttunen proposes that the presupposition is filtered because of the entailment from Sue is married to Sue has a partner. So we don't experience any presupposition of the whole conditional. In a conditional, however, like if Sue is in a good mood, she will bring her partner to the party. There is no entailment between the antecedent and the presupposition. And as a result, this presupposition is projected. Now, this has the correct predictions, precisely avoiding the proviso problem. Namely, sentence 2 presupposes that Sue has a partner, nothing weaker. This comes as a result of the inferential nature of Karttunen's proposal as opposed to the denotational approach of Kleene and Peters and Heim-Stalnecker and similar solutions. Now, when we talk about conditions on satisfaction, we see already traces of this distinction in what Karttunen had to say on speaker's beliefs. He says something like the following: the filtering condition does not work here since it relies on the first operand alone. To get the entailment, we need something more. We must take into account the speaker's beliefs. To see what he means, let's consider the following example. Again, if Sue visits Dan, his beard will annoy her. Now, in normal context, we just have projection, Dan has a beard. However, if the speaker believes that if Sue visits Dan, he'll grow a beard before she arrives, then that conditional, together with the antecedent of the conditional we have in the sentence, together entail that Dan has a beard by the time Sue arrives. Therefore, we don't experience any presupposition or just filtering. These are early signs of a satisfaction-based approach. However, we might expect the same approach to hold when we explicitly mention speakers' beliefs. For instance, if we say explicitly, if Sue visits Dan, he'll grow a beard before she arrives. And if Sue visits Dan, his beard will annoy her, we would expect filtering. However, Karttunen's approach doesn't do that because the approach itself is not recursive at all. Sentences, complex sentences like 2 are not treated at all. To do that, we first can eliminate completely speakers' beliefs from the whole story and have a fully recursive system instead that encapsulate the idea that Karttunen expresses here by treating cases like 2 explicitly in the system without relying on speakers' beliefs. Now, there are other common reactions to Karttunen's solution that point to other possible problems. First, the first common reaction is that the proposal does not derive conditional presupposition. And a second reaction is that the filtering conditions in this approach are stipulative. I'll deal with them in turn very quickly. Conditional presuppositions are what we experience in cases like Bart Hurt's famous example. If Theo is a scuba diver, then he will bring his wetsuit. We don't necessarily infer from that Theo has a wetsuit, but only if he's a diver that he has a suit. And this seems to be precisely the what we need, and this is what the Kleene-Peters, Heim-Stalnaker approaches derive. The common wisdom is that 2 is indeed a presupposition of 1, and I would like to challenge this common wisdom by basically suggesting that 2 is only a condition on 1's satisfaction. The evidence for that is that even if we just say 3, Theo is a scuba diver, he has a wetsuit, any no presupposition trigger around, we do feel that there is an implication that the fact that Theo has a wetsuit somehow follows from him being a scuba diver. But I would say that this is implied rather than presupposed by 3. If a similar pragmatic inference holds for cases like 1, then it means that the hearer, or the speaker for that matter, in a sentence like 1, already suggests that 2 holds, and this on its own is sufficient in order to cancel or filter the presupposition that Theo has a suit, has a wetsuit, and that's basically the idea here, that we don't need conditional presuppositions in order to account for inferences like 2. It's just the filtering of presuppositions that is at stake due to the fact that speakers tend to infer conditionals like 2 anyhow. Perhaps the most critical remarks made in the literature towards Karttunen's proposal were that it's stipulative. Actually, my claim in a recent paper from Salt last year was that this is not completely justified. If we look at the principle underlying the Kleene-Peters approach, we see that filtering in a construction phi operator psi occurs if phi has an LD value in any situation where the value of phi determines the bivalent result. These are the cases where psi's presuppositions are considered denotationally redundant. However, Karttunen does something very similar at the inferential level, where filtering in such a construction occurs if the presupposition of psi are entailed by any non-LD value of phi. So if phi has an LDV, filtering is expected as in Kleene-Peters approach. If it has a non-LDV, then the principle requires satisfaction of the presuppositions in psi. The corollary are the conditions for filtering as stipulated by Karttunen, but I would claim that there is an underlying principle that leads to these apparent stipulations. Now, there are other challenges for Karttunen's approach. Specifically for the current talk, it's a cumulative local context. It's what we see in sentences like, if Anne left, then Sue joined her, and Anne was happy that Anne and Sue left. We don't expect any presupposition to be projected here, but Karttunen's approach relies only on simple constructions, and in the simple construction, Sue joined her and Anne was happy that Anne and Sue left. There is no entailment between the first conjunct and the presupposition of the second conjunct. As a result, Karttunen would not expect any filtering here. What we might expect is that the accumulation of the 2 operands, Anne left and Sue joined Anne, that entail that Anne and Sue left, would license the filtering, And this is indeed what I'm going to propose here. There is a second challenge that I'm not going to discuss in detail now, which concerns selective filtering, how presuppositions are inhibited at the trigger level, not necessarily at the propositional level, but Karttunen logic that I'm proposing here is a calculus that addresses the projection problem only at the propositional level. Only with a propositional fragment it makes sense to use it. The second problem is important, and it's left here for further work. Now, to explain what the calculus logic is all about, we have to explain a central notion on which it is based. It is based on a calculus, or actually a general notion of a projection calculus, which is a mechanism to take complex propositions that have trivalent values into simple propositions that have just a presupposition and assertive content, and therefore the presupposition is already exposed in the form. So we have a propositional language over such simple propositions that just give you directly the bivalent presupposition and the bivalent assertive content, and we want to see what the ultimate presupposition of the complex proposition is. If we look at a sentence like "Ik Sue preach Dan," the antecedent has no presupposition, therefore we have here a simple proposition with top tautology as a presupposition. The consequent has "used to smoke." Dan used to smoke as the propositional presupposition with the assertive content that he doesn't smoke now. When we treat such a complex proposition as in 1b, a complex formula as in 1b, using Wick-Kleene, we actually derive the presupposition that Dan used to smoke in a simple proposition, as we see right now. The denotation of such a simple formula is obtained directly by transplication. You just take the bivalent value of the presupposition. If it's true, the value is the value of the assertive content. If it's false, the value is undefined or failure. Now, a projection calculus, therefore, is a general method of translating complex L3 formulas into simple L3 formulas of this form, form alpha beta, where alpha is the presupposition, beta is the assertive content, and this is a general solution to the projection problem with propositional fragments. Now, the Wick-Kleene calculus, when we look at it formally, is what happens when we have two formulas, phi and psi. Each of them already has a simple form due to the recursively due to the Wick-Kleene. So phi, for instance, has phi1 as presupposition, and the presupposition of the complex construction phi operator psi is going to be phi1 conjunction psi1. The assertive content is just an application of the bivalent operator between phi2 and psi2, their respective assertive contents that are obtained recursively. If we just take any operator, we get the general scheme that we see here. We always have a conjunction on the left because these are the presuppositions that are just accumulated, and we have the operator applying to the assertive content only. This is Wick-Kleene in a projection calculus format. Now, the general idea behind the Karttunen calculus itself is that it maps any L3 formula, any complex L3 formula, in any given bivalent context to a pair of presupposition and assertive content. In this way, we don't only take the formula into account, but also the bivalent context. This is very similar to what we have in the Heim-Stalnecker approach. However, unlike the Heim-Stalnecker approach, we do not nullify the presupposition once we are doing that. We keep the presupposition in the given context if the context does not entail it. This is how I interpret here Karttunen's approach. When we don't have a context, we don't necessarily need to always assume that we have a non-trivial global context. The context might be just top tautology, and then we would still derive the presupposition of kappa, the L3, the complex L3 formula. The context plays the same role as in the Heim-Stalnecker approach, but it does not eliminate presuppositions. Rather, it allows to derive them, and it derives them using the principle that I call Karttunen satisfaction. If the context entails the presupposition of a simple formula kappa 1, kappa 2, then we have filtering. And what we derive as a presupposition here involves the top, as namely no context, no presupposition whatsoever. If, on the other hand, there is no entailment, then we just keep the presupposition that we have, and we get projection. The heart of the system is in the rewriting of binary operations. Basically, what we do is we accommodate the assertive content of the first operand phi into the context of in which psi, the second operand, is evaluated. This is done for implication and conjunction. Not surprisingly, what we accommodate into the context in the case of this junction is the negation of this assertive content of psi in the context C, which I'm calling here phi 2. Now, in general, what we do for any operator is we do the whole accommodation of assertive contents into the context of the operand on the right, psi, based on an operator that I'm calling LDV, which for conjunction and implication it's just negation, because because 0 on the left is the determinant value. For disjunction, it's just the identity, because truth on the left is the determinant value for disjunction. Now, when we look at how filtering is treated using this system, it's very similar to the way it's done in Karttunen's original paper. For instance, if we have a sentence like, if Dan is bewhiskered, his bird will annoy Sue, and we have the corresponding L3 formula. It's a complex formula with the antecedent without any presupposition. We can evaluate it using a null context, which means that the context is tautological, which means that we take the bewhiskered antecedent into the context of the consequent. Once we have this, the rule of satisfaction in this Karttunen-based system eliminates the presupposition, because bewhiskered entails having a bird. So what we get at the end is an implication without any presupposition. When we look at a similar case with projection, basically everything remains the same, but just because in a case like if Sue visits Dan, his beard will annoy her, there is no such entailment, the presupposition that Dan has a beard is fully projected. Now, what is new in the system is the way we are treating satisfaction and accumulative context in comparison to Karttunen's original proposal. We have seen already that if you have a sentence like, if Sue visits Dan, his beard will annoy her, that presupposes that Dan has a beard. But we also have seen that we can add to such a sentence as one, as an assumption that if Sue visits Dan, he will have a beard. Whichever way this comes about, if this is preceded to sentence one, the presupposition needs to get filtered. And therefore we need to show that a conjunction of 3 and 1 presupposes nothing. Now, basically, basically the way to do that is to look at what we get here. We have here a complex formula of the form that we see now here, where basically only the last consequent in the second conditional, his beard will annoy her, contains a presupposition. Now, this presupposition that he has a beard is asserted, but not explicitly. It is asserted as the consequent of the first conditional. When we accumulate, because the system is based on accumulation of information from assertive content into the context of evaluation, the context of evaluation for his beard will annoy her contains the assumption that if Sue visits Dan, he'll have a beard, and the antecedent Sue visits Dan. And this is essentially what we see here in this simplification. The result is a full filtering. So at the end, what we get is the claim that if Sue visits Dan, he'll have a beard that will annoy her, without any presupposition because the first conjunct already contains the information that he will have a beard as soon as she arrives, as soon as she visits him. To conclude, the advantages of this new Karttunen calculus is that we have filtering without proviso as in Karttunen original paper. However, in a fully recursive propositional language that dissociates presuppositions from conditions on satisfaction, these two aspects are new. It deals with a cumulative context without proviso, and it involves an abstract notion of projection calculus where different approaches can be compared. Now, there are remaining challenges, of course. First of them is selective filtering that I briefly mentioned, and there is the huge problem of quantification, which is a problem for denotational approaches. There are various approaches to quantification with presupposition, but it's perhaps even a bigger challenge for an inferential system like a Karttunen-based system. At any rate, I hope that the main thrust has been conveyed during this talk that we can actually use the ideas in Karttunen's original paper profitably for a fully recursive notion of projection, in at least with propositional fragments. Thank you. And thanks to all those good people and to the ERC for the financial support.